Okay? So on these three kind of criteria, authority, membership, state, we can describe these four different types of religious organizations. The first, the church, the classic example. Think Catholic Church in medieval times, okay? In this case, it's a kind of a hierarchical authority system. Hierarchical. Holy cow, hierarchy. I'll put hierarchy, that works. The membership is basically infant, so bringing people in as an infant, and also something we call universal. In other words, this system tries to bring everybody into the religious fold. It relates with the state, and actually in the medieval times, the Catholic Church tried to be subversive in terms of its relationship with the state. Basically the only religious game in town. Now sects, as Weber and McGuire to us, let's take Quakers that I mentioned before. Well, what's their authority system? Well, they're mostly basically democratic, radically egalitarian in how they do their religious life. They tend to have adult members, and there's a sense of in joining this church that not just anybody can join, but that you join as an adult having made a choice. And so there's this sense that people who are in the group are somewhat of an elect group of people. And then in terms of relations with the state, they're negative relationships. So skeptical of the state, doesn't want to use state authority to be the only religious game in town, and is going to resist participating, especially in the military and violent activities of the state. Now we come to the third type of religious group, which is denomination. What a denomination is basically a church-type religious organization that's now in a context where there's a lot of religious groups. So think of the United States. Think of the Episcopalian Church, the Lutheran Church, the Southern Baptist Conference, the Methodists, the Presbyterian Church, all these denominations. They usually have some sort of, some type of hierarchy that's a part of them as their authority. They usually will have a range of membership, but it goes from infant to adult. And then most importantly, in terms of why this is a denomination instead of a church, is that it's non-exclusive. So denomination religious groups basically assume the continued existence of religious groups all around them. So they don't want to be the only game in town. And they're okay with that, and they're not going to use state authority to try and be that way. And then finally we come to the cults, which we've talked about before. You can think of something like Scientology, so a very specific authority system that's closed off. Membership is kind of the elite, not just anybody's allowed in. It's really hard to become a member. And they're also a negative relationship with the state. And because they see themselves as elite, they're not interested so much in using the state to make everybody else a believer, but actually their own belief system and practices usually cause them to continue to be usually a small group that kind of just tries to protect itself from others. So those are kind of the four ideal types, if you will, of religious groups within church sect theory. And as you come to understand this, I point you towards the charts in McGuire on pages 159 through 161, where she takes this same system that we've just laid out here, and she says you can really structure these groups on two axes. One of the axes are, does the group have a positive or a negative relationship with the state? And we know for a fact the church type and the denominational type both have very positive relationships with the state. So they're okay with the state, and in some cases want to use the state in order to bring about their religious vision. Whereas the sect and cult are much more skeptical, much more distant from the state, and not interested in using religious vision to society. The other tension that McGuire talks about is the question of whether the religious group sees itself as the only game in town or one among many. In this case, the church in the classic medieval sense and the sect both see themselves as like having the religious vision. Okay, so they've been in tension with each other then. Think Protestant Reformation, when that was the first sect breakaway from the church, the Enlightenment, and both of in that conflict, both of the groups saw themselves as the game in town and wanting to try and enforce that. Whereas with the denomination and cult, both of these kind of assume that they're not the only game in town, that there's other religious groups around, and that doesn't really threaten their own internal religious vision. So that is the brief kind of overarching view of church sect theory. As I've tried to argue, it gives us a way to really thickly describe the religious groups that we see, and to get a sense of their internal structure around things like authority and membership, their relationship with the state and with the society around them, and all that put together gives us a sense of how they're going to interact with other social institutions in the world, which is much of what the rest of our course is about. Now, one final note on this theory is that it's problematic because it's hard to kind of understand religious change. And McGuire notes this in her book when she says, you know, I take a look at all this, but if you follow the same religious group across time, they can oftentimes appear in different categories. So for example, at one time the Catholic Church, especially in medieval times, was this church type of religious organization. But in the United States in the early 1900s, it was almost more of a sect type organization because it was kind of embattled in the United States where there's a Protestant majority. But then by the 1960s, with John F. Kennedy being elected president, comfort in the United States around Catholic, this group looks more like a denomination in the United States because it assumes that other religious groups are going to exist around it. So there's some problems with the theory in trying to fully explain the complete identity of a religious organization. And as we know, sociologists, everything depends on context and the environment which the organization is in order to try and kind of determine what type it is. Okay. Let me finally say then that in terms of determining change, change can come from anywhere. It can be internal, so you think of Ernst and how theology can start to drive, or think of that tension argument and how wanting to ratchet up tension by changing the internal messages of the group can drive change. Or it can be external. So for example, you can be more tolerant, become more tolerant of a more diverse range of religious groups, as happened in the 1970s with the influx of Eastern Asian religious groups. And so therefore, those religious groups don't have to be so kind of walled off to the world around them, but can exist in a more kind of peaceful state with other religious groups and with the state. So there's a lot of dynamics that are going on in this system, and I just wanted to give you a sense of the system, but also some of the issues or the problems with using this to understand religion. So for moving forward, we're going to transition to look at how religion connects with other social structures. And as we move forward to the rest of the semester and encounter different social structures and institutions, such as politics, ideology and class, violence, I want you to always keep two questions in mind as we go. First off, for every topic that we do, always think, what do we mean by religion? Are we talking about the religious beliefs of individuals? Are we talking about the way a particular religious group is structured? Are we talking about the religious rituals of groups around certain issues? What is it in terms of religion that we're talking about? And then the other piece that I want you to keep in mind is always to ask, how does religion affect social institutions around it, and how do those institutions act back on religion? Okay, so keeping in mind that there's always kind of this two-way street that's going on. Keep those two questions in mind for the rest of the course, and that'll help you understand each topic as we go. Okay, that's it for now. This is the end of the second recording of this lecture. Keep your eyes out for the next lecture coming soon on Church and State. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye.